Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm filming a video about how I would set up the LifeOS that I showed you in my past video if I was starting it from scratch today. I filmed it nearly a year ago, and in that time my workflows have changed a little bit and Capacities has developed a lot, and with that have come some changes to how I would set this up. So I'm just going to do a walkthrough video. Feel free to take what resonates and leave what doesn't. I'll walk you through the changes as they come up, but in a nutshell, the basic object type setup is largely the same, particularly with reference to the day object type that I use with my daily notes every single day. So let's get started. So when you're setting up a new space, we need some structure in which to work. So we can start by creating new object types. My tip would always be to start with a template and adjust from there. So from here, I would definitely add a quote. I actually created this template, so I don't really want to change anything except for one setting, which is this default link view. I always use quotes in this view, so if I know that to be true, I may as well set it as the default link. You'll see how that works later on. Next up, I will add project. And just while we're here, I'll also add idea. Once you've chosen a template and loaded it into your space, you're completely free to edit it as you wish. So for me, projects, for some inexplicable reason, must be purple. And I have no need for the collaborator property, so I'm just going to delete it. If you delete something from here, it would be deleted from all projects, whereas if I add something, it would be added to all projects. So a few properties that I like to add are a date property for when I started a project, and what I would call an explainer property for why I started the project when I did. And then often I stop my projects and I want to know why that is. Now, this pattern of explaining something in my capacities is something that you will see a lot. And it's all part of my philosophy, which I call essence, collecting the essence of the everyday. I always struggle to explain it because it's just so innate to me now after all these years. But essentially, I want to track pixels of my everyday so that future me can look back and get somewhat of an idea about who I was at a certain time, what I was into, what was going on, how I was feeling, and stuff like that. So I create properties in which I can track these pixels and they will build that picture for later. So this is a pixel of why creating this project was important to me at a given time. And while I'm here, I'm also going to open this status object property and just click fixed set. What this means is from day one, the only tags I will ever see in this drop down menu are related to status. Right now I have no tags, but if I create an in progress tag, A, my tag object type is created, but B, it only keeps status properties in there based on what I've already added. So if I add a tag about PKM, for example, because I haven't used that in any project, my drop-down menu remains just in progress. So if you apply that fixed set from the very beginning, it just keeps things a bit neater. And for stuff like status or ratings, that's helpful. So that's my projects. How do I use projects in capacities? It's not for any in-depth project management. I do that elsewhere. But for me, it's basically just collecting things about the projects I've got going on. Sometimes it's just a list of like blocks. Other times it's more writing and explaining and images and bringing things together. It really just depends on what the project is and how much I'm into it at a given time. I just find it useful to have, but it isn't like the center of my productivity system. It's more just like notes on my personal projects, I would say. Okay, next up is ideas. I don't change that at all. Super simple. Some ideas are big enough that I don't want to just leave them as a block in a daily note. I want to actually turn them into something, and I just put them here. And every so often I'll have a look at my list of ideas and see if there's anything that sparks from it, and if not, they get to stay there, and I just get a wall of what I've been thinking about as well, which was also fun. Okay, next up I'm going to do milestones, which could indeed be related to projects. I don't typically use them in that way, but I mean, never say never. From here, I don't need much. I want to add a cover image, and I want to add a date property called achieved on. What this does is it gives me a button in my daily note where I can add a milestone linked to whichever day I'm on super quickly. This has been on my list for about a year, so it's a milestone to finally film it. But not only does that give me something that can be quickly captured and then give me this date reference, we'll be spending a bit more time here later on in the video, but it also gives me something to sort on. And what I mean by that is if I create other milestones like this, and if you want to see the date property, you can just change the card view. What I can do is filter and sort on that date property. So I could sort by my newest achievements, like that. Or I could filter just to find things in 2024 or 2021 or whatever. And whenever you've got a filter or a sort order that you really like, so for me, seeing my most recent achievement first, you can just save that as a query if you're on the Pro or Believer plan. And I call this a milestone timeline. And this is just going to automatically update every time I add a new milestone in. Because it's pinned, which you can tell by this icon here, it is nested underneath my milestone object type, and I also get this tab here. So I often just stay in this view and get to see a list of my achievements, which is really nice when you're not feeling so great. If you wanted to link milestones to projects, do add property, multi-select, project, and then change this link type here. Whatever you define here is going to be in a drop-down menu. So I don't want my tags in the drop-down menu, I want my projects. So by changing that type, I define that drop-down menu, like that. And then that will appear in the backlinks of the project as well, which can be quite nice to see as well. So that's those object types. I also had an object type called Sparks in the previous version, which was just for collecting general things. And to be honest, I just use my daily note for that now, so I wouldn't create that. But if you wanted to, I would just use quote, definition, or Zettel and just change the name to be Sparks. It's pretty much the same setup. It's super simple. Okay, after that, we're on to the time-based object types, so day, week, month, and quarter. Now, this is where I've had some changes, because what I used to do is link each of those things to an essence object type, which was for tracking the pixels of the everyday, like I've already mentioned. I got rid of that essence object type because I realised it was more logical to bake it into the time-based object types I'm about to create, so that's what we're going to do. I also realised on reflection that I don't actually use quarters really for anything. That might just be this year and last year where my goals were a bit different. There's been a lot of change in my life in the last couple of years, and I think I've now just settled into this thing where I'm really looking at quite big picture goals and then boiling them down to sort of monthly aspirations and really weekly and daily actions that I'm focusing on. So I'm not going to put quarters in this video. But the most important one we have to start with is days. This really is the centre of my system in combination with the daily note. The reason I have it is because the daily note cannot be edited in the sense of adding properties. And when you add properties, you add structure, and I love structure. I asked myself the same range of questions, and warning, there's quite a few, every single day at multiple times of the day. So if I know that every day I want to ask myself these things and that ideal me fills them in every day, then it makes perfect sense to add a property to capture each of the things I want to ask. If I can't do that with the daily note, I need to find a way to have properties that somehow talk to my daily note. And it's all held together with this very simple date time property. So we'll add that first, and I will add one text property just to show you how this works and why, and then I'll set up the rest. So if I open up this day object type, I have the title, a place to write the date, and something to say about it. In itself, this is nice. It's a dedicated place to work, but I spend a lot of time in my daily notes. But because I've added that date property, both to day and to this milestone, I can see that day that I've just created in the same view as the rest of my daily note. Which means if I click on that toggle, I have got that full day object right here. So this is just how my daily note looks all of the time. I'm like working on my daily note, I'm adding things to it randomly throughout the day, but I've got this one place where I can see everything in context. And that has worked for me consistently for a long time now, and I would recommend it to anybody. So the bridge that pulls the daily note, which can't be edited, and the date object type, which is mine and my creation, is that date property. And it's pulled together in Capacities Central Calendar, and yeah, works perfectly well for me. So now that we've got that bit done, we can add, again, many more properties. The number of properties I'm going to add is a byproduct of my essence practices. Don't feel like this is the bare minimum, because that's not true. All you want to be thinking when you're watching this is, what do you want to ask yourself every day? If you want to ask it 5 out of 7 days in a week, put it in here. There's no pressure to fill it out, but equally it is a reminder if you know you most likely want to fill it out. So we will continue. I'm going to add a couple of number properties. So morning mood, and I rank this out of 5 based on vibes and vibes alone. And I always use a progress bar for this with 5 steps and a nice sunny colour. And I also add an equally vibe-based check on my energy levels, which is also out of 5, which is a progress bar, 5 steps. I'll give it a lime colour today. And then after that, I write one thing I'm grateful for and one affirmation. Now, this is everything that I do in the morning. Later on in the day, I do some other things, and then I track some other things afterwards. And what I found really nice was using a text property as a line break. So I call it morning, and I use a template to fill that in later, which I will show you in a little bit. So that goes at the top like that. After that, I have my evening check-in, which needs a moon, of course. That's going to be another line break. And then it comes to the list of things I ask myself in the evening, such as what made you feel good, another number property for mood, progress bar with 5 steps, and this time blue, another text property for a kind or inspiring moment, and then I have a good decision, and another text property for a not so good decision. As a side note, trying to retrain myself by focusing on what good decisions I made that moved me closer to my goals versus the string of bad decisions I might have made that have taken me in the opposite direction from my goals. That's been game changing for me. Seriously, incredibly powerful stuff. And I've really enjoyed like taking a log of them through the day, actually, either just in my daily note or even in day 1 sometimes. And then boiling it down to like one really good decision and one not so good decision. And I very quickly found that not wanting to write anything in my not so good decision text property was actually a fantastic deterrent day to day. And yeah, I feel like I'm in line with my goals right now. And I do have to give quite a lot of credit to these text properties. I also write down if I have any illnesses. I've suffered with like horrific migraines in the past, so having like a trace of when that was can be quite helpful, and with the effect it had on the rest of my day. And then the next thing is an essence line break. I could argue, and you could argue, that all of this is essence, and that's a fair point, but I don't know. I can't explain it to somebody else. This is just kind of how my brain works. So I have song on repeat, because if I like a song, it's on repeat. And then I have reading, watching, wanting, trying to be a bit slower with my spending. So it's quite good to like see if I remember what I want looking forward to, where I went, and then I add a cover image called Pick of the Day. And because this is so long, because I answer so many questions on my iPad, which is always in landscape mode, I add a property called add a pic, because I will forget. So picture this like landscape on my iPad. I fill this in the morning, and then everything else either throughout the day or in the evening. But as mentioned, I add a few line breaks in, and the way that I add them in easily every day is with a template. So object settings, template, and then I just add emojis. So this sun is my favourite, so I copy and paste a bunch of those in. A sunset, and then essence is always a star. I'm using Raycast, by the way, with their emoji picker. Recommend that entirely. And that's the line breaks. And then to get the date to automatically fill in for me as the title, I use this syntax. It's my favourite. So I'll show you what this looks like. So if I go to calendar, day, and scroll past that and click new template, the date's filled in. And because I always create these objects from that button in the daily note, the date's filled out for me. And then again, morning and evening / throughout the day. The day object has been working consistently for ages, and I can either add or take away properties if I want to change something. Again, another reminder, if you delete a property, it's deleted from all your days. So if you don't want it anymore, don't forget to do something with the data that's already in the properties in your previous date objects. Otherwise it will be lost and you can't get it back. And just to show you what the reminder looks like for a picture, if I hover over it, it says don't forget. And on my iPad, I can still just see the name of the property. So I scroll up and then I can add my cover image. So I'll delete the second date object that we have here because we don't need it anymore. But again, that's now in my daily note, so I can see everything. Here's what my number properties look like, which is quite fun, and I can just fill it all in this one central place. And I really enjoy that because I feel like I get the best of both worlds. The structure of this date object with all the capabilities that the Capacities daily note already has. Okay, next up we have week. I will create my own type here. And this is a very similar, I'll use a calendar for this. It's a very similar setup to day. Again, with a focus on infusing essence into it. It's the exact same idea of having a bunch of text properties. So I will add lots of those so you don't have to watch me do it. Okay, so I've added a load of them here with another text property as a reminder. And I make sure that that is at the top of the week object so that when I hover over I can add my icon. But there's a few different things, so I'll show you that next. I'm going to add a date property and I'm going to scroll down to this settings section and I'm going to require a range. What that means is when I click, I'll just move it up, on the date property, it makes me add a start and an end date. So click on the start date and shift click on the end date. Now this is useful for sorting, filtering and queries, but it's also really nice because of how date ranges work in Capacities with this calendar. If you are on a day that falls within a date range in any of your objects, it will also show up in your daily note. So I have got more context where I want it, which is in the place that all of my integrations fall into and where I spend a lot of my time. So I have the bigger picture of the week plus the day and any fun things that were going on alongside it. And of course, anything I created today. So that's because I've required that range, and that's something that we added like a month or so after the last video, and that was one of the first things I wanted to change. I also always add a cover image, and what I typically do here is I go to existing content, and what I see is all of the images I've used like during the week, and I'll just pick my favourite one. and then I pick why it's my favourite one. So again, it's one of those pairings of capturing something and explaining it. I do that again with rating. So I have one called why this rating, and I use a single select property called rating, whose icon is obviously a star. I always use ratings tags. Similar to the status of projects, the only tags I want to see in this drop down are ratings. You might be thinking, well, these aren't ratings. You're correct, but it's because I haven't set it up yet. So if I create a 5-star rating, and then I create a new week and look at that drop down, I'm only seeing that 5-star. I would then just paste 4 stars and 3 stars, 2 and 1, and then that's my ratings tag ready for me super quick. So yeah, now I have my drop down ready to apply. I'll write 5-star, hopefully it will be a good week. But again, I get to state what the rating is and explain it in the same way that I add what my favourite image was and I explain it. So that's the main essence things. Then I add a link to the next week. When I do my weekly review, I always set up the next week, and this is how I do it. So a single select called next week. Again, I don't want my drop down to be a tag. I want it to be a week. I only want 1 week. So I choose a single select. And what I do is write the new week name. And then shift click, my next week is set up, ready to go. And then a final thing that I do for weeks is I add a week number. I found out there's a really easy way to check the number, and that is by looking at the Capacities calendar. So this is week 12. And again, if I was watching this video, I would ask, why do you use a title like this, a date property and the week number? Are they not all tracking the same thing? Effectively, yes. But I'm not consistent enough with titles to use this as any type of filtering and sorting. Weeks definitely work for that. But I actually spent some time and I moved previous reviews from years of doing them into Capacities because I really value seeing them all together. And that means I have the ability to search for all weeks that have a week number of 12. And then I get to see on this day throughout many years. I've not been using these exact things in all together for 5 years, but I've used different aspects of them. So I still find value in looking at them. If you want to create a query like I do, it's nothing fancy or automated, but I would do query weeks where, and filter by properties, and filter where the week number equals 12. And quite honestly, I just change that number every week. So open it up and say on this week, and I want to pin it, because when I pin it, it's under weeks, as I said, and I get that tab. So just change the week number as you go. And I find that the joy that I get from these reviews is worth the clicks it takes to change the number. I also use a template for this for my weekly review. So we'll add that here. Just call it review. And I don't fill any of this in. The point of the review is that's when I fill these things in. But I want to do 2 things. I want to see the properties of my daily notes from the previous week. And I want to see what I've collected. So 2 queries. So query days where, and edit that to say that the date is on or after 1 week ago. This works because I religiously do my reviews on the same day. And I always choose the table view. And you can actually move things around. So it's more beneficial for me to see the actual properties I'm filling in rather than tags, etc. So you could rearrange them like that. And if you always want a wide layout for this because you've got a lot here, you can actually set that up in the settings as well. So if I go back to week, object settings, choose the wide layout there. That was just an aside. Let's carry on with the template. So I had to query all my days and see that, which is quite fun as well, because if I've had a bad week, then like the mood will like dip in the morning, in the evening, and I can like visually see that with the progress bars. And then the other thing that I do is just a very, very generic object type query where I return all ideas, projects, quotes, milestones, etc. from the last week. So again, filter by properties, and this time I do created at is on or after 1 week ago. And I give it this wall view, which means I have some really fun things to review. And then I go through that, I write down what I think I remember, and then I fill in these items here. And that's my basic weekly review. I get the data from the day objects here, but I also find it beneficial to look at my daily notes. So what I will do is shift and click on the calendar, and then I get my daily note in this right hand side, and I can just scroll through like that, go through my daily notes and sort them out. That is also really helpful for remembering little like snippets I might have missed. So those are like the two pillars of my reviews. I've got these queries here, and I physically go through the daily notes as well. Okay, so that's my week. I will say in general, this is more for reviewing rather than planning, because I have become a paper person for quite a lot actually. If you're interested in hearing more about that, let me know. But yeah, this is for my reviews. I like the standardization of my reviews when I have them in a digital format, and I like the flexibility of paper and the fact that it's literally right in front of me. My job, whilst it is working full-time at Capacities, actually doesn't make me spend a lot of time in Capacities. Most of my hours in Capacities are spent before work, on my lunch break and after work. So paper means I don't have to remember to come into Capacities to check something, like it's right in front of me. I do a lot of context switching, like a lot of different apps throughout the day, and I found paper is just really useful to help mitigate against that, because I was forgetting things and that doesn't feel good. So yeah, this is mainly for reviews. Similarly, I have month and months, which again are often for reviews as well. And again, they are infused with things that help me collect the pixels of my months. You'll recognise a lot of this by now. Cover image, why this pic, to explain why. The text property for don't forget the pic. A number for the month number. A single select property for my rating with a fixed set. And of course, a text property to explain why that rating. And then a single select for next month. Again, I don't want it to link to tag. I want it to link to month. So I apply that. And then a fun thing, oops, I didn't want that. Be really careful when you're deleting blocks properties. Blocks are where you write. And if you have more than one, you get these drop-down menus, which can be cool. But if you ever want to delete blocks, you have to make sure that there's nothing in them, like you haven't written anything, because if you just delete it, like it's gone. And one way to check that you haven't got anything written in them is by going to any object type and the table view for it. And you'll see word counts. So content 0 and this new property 0. If every single object has 0 things written in that property, it's safe to delete. But if you're not sure, please do a manual review, because you don't want to delete something that you really wanted to keep. Just an aside there. So I didn't mean a blocks property, I meant a text property. And I added one called Piece of Celeb News, because I used to do this years ago and I was reviewing my old ones, and it was actually so fun because I remember them all being like a really big deal at the time and I'd completely forgotten them. So I like to track it. Then I do another favourite media, and then I have like a essence memory exercise, and it's just called essence energy. And obviously I have all this essence elsewhere. I could review all my days, all my weeks and everything else, and like get a narrative of what I was looking at, but and I'd do that later on. But I like to think of it first. Like, what do I remember right now to sum up the month? And I just write it there. It doesn't have to be anything long. It's just a bit of an exercise for me to further engage in my own practices. That's everything. It works completely the same as everything else I've shown so far. So I can add in the month number and query months. I actually had a really interesting insight from this month number practice towards the end of last year when I was pulling in my previous reviews. And I realised that in 5 years of doing some form of reviewing and planning, I had never once done a February review. And that told me that I'm one of those classic people who used to be extremely good in January and then just forget everything in February. So it meant this year, when February rolled around, I completely changed things up. I prioritised the goals that I'd set and kind of reduced other things I might be normally doing so that I could get really good habits. And it paid off. And I now have a February review for 2025. And again, what so much of this space and this system is about essence for future me, it's so excellent because it has benefits for me right now. And like, I don't think it's a surprise that I love Capacities, but I love it because it supports like all versions of me, including versions I haven't even met yet. And I absolutely love that. And who would have thought that a simple number property and a query for like on this month could have given me that? But it did. Okay, so that's basically it. Obviously I have other object types, but not for like the LifeOS type things. So I'll just leave it there for that. But I can't move on without showing you the daily note template. So I'll click on those 3 dots and use a template, and then I want to create a daily note template. Now, in the last video, I had my word of the year, my vision board for the year, and then block references pulling out like my goals and habits that I want to do daily, weekly, monthly, and all of that. That habit tracking and like goal setting practice has changed more towards paper and like a different app for habit tracking. If you want me to talk about that, I can. Just let me know. So that means that my daily note can be a lot more like basic now. So I do still have my vision board, but I don't really want to show my vision board for this year. So I've just pasted an image from Unsplash in the same position that the image is in on my new daily note. And I also have a quote. And the way that I set it up is like this. I actually make a lot of objects like this where I type out what I want the title to be and then hashtag turn into quote. And because of that setting that we applied right at the beginning of the video, where quotes embed as small cards by default, that's what happened as soon as I created one. And I put that on the right hand side. I have another quote underneath, which I currently can't remember, which might mean it's not doing what it's meant to do, but that just sits underneath. And that's all I have, because that means that when I go into my daily note, so I'll just apply this now, I am inspired by the vision board that I've set and motivated by at least the top quote that I can remember. And then there's just what I actually need to see here. And then any of the comments or things I've captured that I send via integrations end up beneath it. And I find this combined with my like day-to-day like paper planning to be extremely useful, and I have stuck to the habits and goals that I've set more consistently this year. Am I saying that's just because of a daily note? No, I'm saying in general I've moved towards systems that really work for me. If you liked the idea of the block references that I showed in my last video, it still worked really nicely, and I would have probably continued with that if I was always in Capacities, but I'm not. I use a lot of different apps throughout the day, so this is just more realistic for me. If you did want to know how to set up the block references, I'll give you a quick demo here. So let's say like goal 1, goal 2, goal 3. I would group them by clicking and dragging, click on 6 dots and click group. And can you see when I hover on each of the goals, there are 6 dots next to it. I actually don't want those 6 dots. I want to go up and left to the 6 dots of the group. I know it's selecting the group because I can see it all selected, versus here it's only selecting one of those goals. Once I've got those 6 dots, I can change the colour. I am partial to purple. And then from here, you can copy the block reference. Open up the daily note template and paste that there. And that's what I did for a lot of last year, and that worked perfectly fine, just it's not how I'm doing things now. The only other thing to remember for a daily note template is if you want it to apply by default every day, you've got to click this star. And now it's applied. If I go to tomorrow and click, that's done for me. Now, day to day, I actually text Capacities. I set up a shortcut via WhatsApp, which works very nicely. So I'll share some information about that somewhere. And all of that shows up in my daily note. And then I go through it sometimes at the end of the day if I've captured a lot, or just at the end of the week. And that means I don't forget everything. The reason this works for me is it's centralized, all on today's date. The idea of time and anchoring myself in time works perfectly for me. Probably explains what drew me to Capacities in some part years ago. But I'm building my systems around that. I'm building my systems around what actually works day to day. And that in itself also explains why I have become a bit of a paper person as well. But hopefully this video showed you some ideas for how you can set up your LifeOS, and if not, showed you at least some of what you saw in my last video. If you have any questions about it or want to learn more about anything in particular, let me know and I'm happy to film or share more. And thank you very much for watching what is probably a very long video.